Well, the Women's Rugby World Cup opens this evening in England. The first women's-only tournament was actually 34 years ago, back in 1991, and things have certainly come a long way since, especially because that first competition, the women had to actually organize it themselves, to the displeasure of the International Rugby Board. Now, fast forward to 2025, organizers are hoping for record-breaking attendance. Hundreds of thousands of tickets have already been sold, with entrances to the final actually already sold out. For more on this, Ben Coles joins us on the program. He's a journalist, more specifically a sports writer for The Observer. Thank you for joining us today, Ben. So, like I said, women's rugby has evolved quite a bit over the past 3 decades or so, and the beginning wasn't easy. Why do you think it was such a challenge to get mainstream recognition? And was that specific to rugby, or was it part of a more general mood, so to speak, for women's sports in the early 1990s?
You're right. Yeah, the first tournament was very much organised kind of by people having to go out on their own, doing it without the authorities showing much interest. And the rise that we've seen in popularity, I think, especially in the last decade, I think what's been really key to that is players' ability to use social media to sort of market themselves really well. The women's game feels very different to the men's game in terms of how infectious the personalities are, the kind of how easily and approachable the athletes are as well. So I think this is going to be a fascinating tournament where the status of those players is going to go to another level. Like you've already said, the amount of tickets sold, we're looking at 375,000 already, which is going to be a record number. That's already triple what we saw at the 2021 World Cup in New Zealand a few years ago. So an enormous moment for the game in England and for the women's game. And I think we're in for a really special tournament.
There have been claims that in some ways women's rugby is surpassing men's. I mean, you kind of hinted at it there with some of the more kind of popular or perhaps approachable personalities of the athletes. Do you think that that's true?
I think it's been key to growing the women's game, and we've seen this a bit with the Lionesses, the England women's football team as well, and their recent success. Is just going out there to prove that the sports are different, and that actually that while they they share the same rules and they share the same approaches, actually they're trying to market and approach the game in a very different way. And I think the women's rugby team, especially in England, have been very successful at that in terms of how well they've connected with fans. We're hoping to see a crowd of around 50,000 there in Sunderland tonight for the opening game against the USA, and hopefully that will just attract more and more interest to the sport, which is really on the up.
Do you think the expectation is that much of this new popularity is mostly women, or are you under the impression that men too have a growing interest in women's rugby?
No, I definitely think I think it's both sexes. I think everybody is kind of engaging. It's not just female supporters, but hopefully the offshoots of this will be that we'll see kind of more and more girls getting involved at grassroots level and at junior level and taking up the sport. A lot of these England players in particular and players from other countries will have grown up 20, 30 years ago playing in boys teams at school level or at club level, and now there's more and more teams available at grassroots level, more girls teams, more kind of girls programs, more elite programs, more professional contracts being given out at the top level for the top players in the world. So hopefully it's just the continuation of this momentum that we've seen over the last 5 years or so.
There was a similar conversation that was had for women's football. How do you think that women's rugby compares to other sports in terms of popularity? And if it's different, to what do you attribute that success?
I think if I think about the market in England here, because the Lionesses have had so much success in the last 2 European Championships, winning both of those competitions, and also reaching that 2023 Women's World Cup final as well. What rugby's now hoping to do is to sort of feed off the momentum from that and to show that actually, with rugby in particular, it's been a story for as long as the sport has been around. It really caters to all different types of body types in terms of bigger, stronger players or faster players in the backs. Like that's always been the case. And hopefully that's where rugby can sort of differentiate itself maybe from other sports and show that actually it is a game for all shapes and sizes. And hopefully that appeals to many people.
I mean, I think similar to Ben Coles is that it seems that women's rugby has taken steps to correct some of the criticisms we've seen about other sports, things like tennis, football. They offer mental health support to those that are in the limelight. There's lots of accredited media outlets, family-friendly environments at matches, perhaps much more so than football or rugby. Do you think that there's been a conscious effort to make this the case, or do you think that this is a natural transformation given the rising popularity amongst younger groups?
No, I think you're right. I think a lot of effort has gone into exploring how we can make sure these athletes kind of progress throughout their careers, ensuring that there's, we're actually giving them the best possible medical care. We're still making advancements in this area. We're still at the very start of making sure that players, for example, have specialist kind of boots made, that players have like thorough kind of maternity leave programs if they want to have children and how they come back. This is very much at its early stages, but I think what we're seeing is that rugby's made a really kind of important effort to try and strengthen in those areas and to try and make the game as easy for those athletes who do, however they sort of approach the sport, ensuring that we have enough research in terms of concussion, for example, which is a huge issue in the men's and women's games. So we're going to be seeing these smart mouth guards during this competition where you see a mouth guard kind of light flashing up red, that's going to be a sign of a concussion, and we're going to make sure that those players get given the most appropriate care. I think those kind of little advancements are all big deals and big moments, but actually we're just at the start of developing this and making sure that seeing how we can improve the women's game and giving those players the best kind of care possible.
Before we get to this tournament specifically, Ben, do you think there have been downsides to this rapid success? I've already seen complaints that players are underplayed. Now, that's underpaid. I think that's a recurring theme for a lot of sports. But there's a widening gap between the top teams and the others. How can some of these concerns be rectified, or can they be rectified in an industry that ultimately is driven by profits to a certain extent?
You're absolutely right. There's kind of a disparity at the moment between teams who have professional contracts, teams who offer semi-pro contracts, a lot of teams who aren't paying their players at all. And naturally, when you sort of have that kind of difference between who teams that are getting paid and teams that aren't, teams that can afford to have players who are full-time professionals on salaries and other players who are, managing part-time jobs or who have to kind of hold down a job full-time and then just train when they can, then you're going to get a disparity on the field because you're going to see there's a difference in preparation, which is critical. I think the long-term feeling and hope will be that this World Cup will generate enough revenue that we can start hopefully leveling out that playing field moving forward, and that by the time we're at, 3 or 4 more tournaments down the line, we have more teams who are fully paid, teams who are getting paid kind of equal salaries as well, who are getting the same kind of preparation and off-field support. And then once that's in place, then you'll get less kind of mismatches and big score lines, which is inevitably will happen at this World Cup because some teams are better prepared than others. But ideally in the future, we'll get more of a level playing field because there'll be more money to go around.
Ben Coles, we only have a couple of seconds left. I just want to talk about this year's tournament. 16 teams competing. Who do you think is favored?
It has to be England. They've won the last 27 matches that they've played since they lost the last World Cup final, and that's a huge, incredible unbeaten run where they've scored loads of points and they've been pushed close a couple of times by teams like France and teams like New Zealand. But the fact that they're at home, they have the strongest squad of players. Other teams have outstanding individuals, but England's depth is the best. I think all of those factors together, a home final at Twickenham in front of 80,000, England have to be the favourites.
Ben Coles, thank you so much.
Thank you.